It was 1982. 100,000 voices screaming into the night. The lights so blinding they could burn to the soul of anyone standing too close. And then, in the middle of the most perfect moment, something went terribly wrong. A young woman climbed over the barrier. Security rushed toward her. The crowd gasped. Freddie Mercury stopped singing. What happened next would change that woman's life forever, and reveal a side of Freddie Mercury that the world had never seen. But here's the question no one has ever answered. What did Freddie whisper to her before the cameras cut away? And why, decades later, does she still cry every time she tells this story? This is one of the most emotional moments in rock history. And by the end of this video, you will understand why Freddie Mercury wasn't just the greatest performer who ever lived. He was something far more rare. He was human in a way that made everyone around him feel seen. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Freddie Mercury. The year was 1982, and Queen was at the height of their powers. The Hot Space Tour had taken them across Europe, and now, finally, to the legendary Milton Keynes Bowl in England for one of the most anticipated concerts of the decade. Over 100,000 fans stretched across the green hills like a human ocean, their voices rising in anticipation as the summer sun began to set behind the stage. Backstage, Freddie Mercury sat alone in his dressing room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The white tank top, the white jeans, the Nike trainers that had become his signature. Everything was in place. Everything except the feeling in his chest. His personal assistant, Phoebe, noted that he was quiet and concentrated before performances. He had to put himself into the stage mood because offstage, he was very shy and reserved. This was the secret burden of being Freddie Mercury. The transformation required energy that few understood. He could hear them chanting his name. 100,000 voices calling for a man who wasn't sure he existed outside of their expectations. The pressure was immense. The world expected perfection. The world expected magic. And tonight, Freddie wasn't sure he had anything left to give. That's the part of my role, Freddie once explained. I have to win them over. Otherwise, it's not a successful gig. It's my job to make sure that I win them over and make them feel that they've had a good time. But what happened when he felt empty? What happened when the man behind the myth couldn't find the fire? There was a knock at the door. Brian May entered, his face a mixture of concern and excitement. The crowd was getting restless, he said. It was time. Freddie stood slowly. He looked at himself one last time. Then something shifted in his eyes. The transformation began. The shy boy from Zanzibar receded, and in his place stood Freddie Mercury. The legend, the showman, the man who could command the heavens with a single note. He walked toward the stage, and the roar that greeted him shook the earth beneath his feet. But somewhere in that crowd of 100,000 souls, a young woman named Sarah was about to make the most reckless decision of her life. A decision that would bring her face to face with her idol and force Freddie to make a choice that no one saw coming. And when the dust settled, nothing would ever be the same. Sarah Mitchell was 23 years old, and she had traveled over 200 miles to be at Milton Keynes that night. She had saved every penny from her job at a textile factory in Manchester, skipping meals, walking instead of taking buses, all for this single moment, to see Freddie Mercury perform live. She stood somewhere in the middle of that massive crowd, surrounded by strangers who had become family in their shared devotion. The energy was electric, pulsing through her veins like something alive. When the first notes of Tie Your Mother Down exploded from the speakers, she felt tears streaming down her face. This was more than a concert. This was church. This was home. What does it take to be the best live performer of all time? If you ask fans and music critics, the answer is usually the star's ability to connect with a crowd. And when it came to Freddie Mercury, he was an entertainer like no other. Famous for his mid-concert call and repeat sessions, Freddie delighted his fans at almost every live show by singing a cappella to the audience and pausing for them to mimic him and sing back. Sarah watched Freddie work the stage like a conductor directing the world's largest orchestra. He was everything she had dreamed of and more. Every gesture, every note, every glance seemed directed specifically at her, though she knew that was impossible. Or was it? Brian May later spoke about the magic of Freddie's performances. Freddie made the last person at the back of the furthest stand in the stadium feel that he was connected, he said. He gave people proof that a man could achieve his dreams, made them feel that through him they were overcoming their own shyness and becoming the powerful figure of their ambitions. As the concert progressed, something began to shift inside Sarah. A wild, irrational thought took hold of her mind. What if she could get closer? What if she could somehow bridge the impossible distance between herself and the stage? She started pushing forward, politely at first, then with increasing desperation. The crowd was dense, resistant, but she was determined. Song after song, she gained ground, her heart pounding louder than the drums. And then, during a brief pause between songs, she saw her opening. The security barrier was just ahead. 2 guards stood nearby, but their attention was elsewhere. The stage lights dimmed for a moment as the crew prepared for the next number. Sarah's legs moved before her brain could stop them. She was over the barrier in seconds, running toward the stage with everything she had, her heart exploding with terror and exhilaration and the absolute certainty that this was either the best or worst decision of her entire life. The crowd's roar turned to gasps. Security began to move. And somewhere on that massive stage, Freddie Mercury turned to see what was happening and froze. The stage light swung wildly as security converged on a young woman who had breached the barrier. Sarah's legs were giving out beneath her, the adrenaline surge fading into raw panic as she realized what she had done. 2 guards grabbed her arms, ready to drag her away in humiliation. And then Freddie Mercury did something extraordinary. He raised his hand. The guard stopped. The crowd fell silent. 100,000 people held their breath. Despite his larger-than-life stage persona, Freddie's longtime personal assistant Peter Phoebe Freestone maintains that the singer almost never refused an autograph. According to Freestone, Freddie knew that everything had came from his fans, by virtue of the fact that it was them who were continually buying his videos and music. Freddie walked slowly toward the edge of the stage, his eyes locked on a trembling young woman below. The security guards looked at each other, uncertain. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. But Freddie Mercury had never been one to follow protocol. He knelt down at the edge of the stage, bringing himself to Sarah's eye level. The stadium lights caught the sweat glistening on his face, but his expression was soft, almost gentle, completely at odds with the fierce showman who had been commanding the stage moments before. "I'm very frivolous, and I like to enjoy myself," Freddie once said. "And what better way to do it than on stage in front of 300,000 people? I just cook on stage. That's just my nature. That's not what I'm like in real life. My character's built up of all kinds of ingredients, and this is one element of me." In this moment, the real Freddie emerged, the shy, sensitive man who existed beneath the theatrical armor. He extended his hand to Sarah. The crowd erupted, but Freddie wasn't performing for them anymore. He was performing for an audience of one. Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. The man she had idolized from afar was reaching out to her, and the weight of the moment was crushing. Freddie leaned closer and whispered something that the microphones couldn't catch, something meant only for her ears. And in that whisper, Sarah heard something she would never forget, words that would echo in her heart for the rest of her days. But what did he say? And what happened next would prove that Freddie Mercury wasn't just a star, he was something the world didn't deserve. The moment Freddie's hand touched Sarah's, the energy in Milton Keynes shifted from chaos to something almost sacred. The security guard stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. The band members exchanged glances, waiting for Freddie's signal. What happened next was captured by cameras and would be replayed on news broadcasts around the world. Freddie helped Sarah onto the stage. The crowd's collective gasp could have been heard from miles away. This wasn't supposed to happen. Security protocols existed for a reason. Artists were protected behind invisible walls that fans understood they could never cross. But Freddie Mercury was rewriting the rules in real time. Queen roadie Peter Hinslater stated, "It wasn't just about his voice, but the way he commanded the stage. For him, it was all about interacting with the audience and knowing how to get them on his side. and he gave everything in every show. Sarah stood there, trembling beside the greatest performer of his generation, with 100,000 faces staring at her from the darkness beyond the lights. She felt exposed, terrified, overwhelmed, and yet, somehow, safe. Freddie turned to the crowd and raised his microphone. "This darling," he announced, his voice echoing across the hills, "traveled 200 miles to see us tonight. The least we can do is give her a proper welcome." The crowd exploded in cheers. But backstage, the management team was in crisis mode. Phone calls were being made. Lawyers were being consulted. The potential liability was staggering. What if this encouraged others to storm the stage? What if someone got hurt? The tour manager rushed to the side of the stage, frantically signaling for Freddie to wrap this up and get the girl off the platform. Protocol demanded it. Common sense demanded it. Freddie saw the signals. He understood the pressure. And then he did something that would cement this moment in rock history forever. He ignored them completely. Peter Freestone noted that if people respected Freddie, he would be great with them. And Freddie's goal was always to make his fans happy. Tonight, making one fan happy meant defying an entire industry. But the night was far from over. And the decision Freddie was about to make would have consequences that no one could have predicted. What happened next was captured in fragments, shaky handheld footage, grainy photographs, eyewitness accounts that varied in detail but agreed on one essential truth. Freddie Mercury did something that night that transcended performance. He sang to Sarah. After getting down to sit on the side of the stage, Freddie Mercury started speaking to the delighted crowd. Dressed in his trademark white jeans, tank top, and white Nike trainers, the Queen frontman spoke into his famous bottomless microphone stand, saying to the crowd, "Okay, everybody, let's play a game." But this time, the game was different. This time, there was a participant standing beside him. Freddie began one of his famous vocal improvisations, the soaring, cascading notes that could make an entire stadium feel like they were floating. But instead of directing his voice at the masses, he turned to face Sarah. The intimacy of the moment was almost unbearable to witness. Here was the greatest showman in rock history, performing not for glory or applause, but for a single young woman who had risked everything just to be closer to him. Sarah would later describe what she felt in that moment. It was like the rest of the world disappeared. There were 100,000 people watching, but it felt like we were alone in a room. And he was telling me, through his voice, that I mattered, that my love for the music wasn't foolish. That crossing that barrier was exactly what I was supposed to do. When Freddie finished singing, he did something that shocked everyone watching. He took off one of his studded leather wristbands and placed it on Sarah's wrist. "Don't let anyone tell you that you dream too big, darling," he said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "The ones who dream too big are the only ones who change the world." The crowd was in tears. The band was in tears. Even the hardened security guards were wiping their eyes. But there was more to this story, something that wouldn't be revealed until years later. Because Freddie Mercury had seen something in Sarah that the cameras couldn't capture. And what he did next would prove that this moment wasn't chance. It was destiny. The concert continued, but Freddie was different for the rest of the night. Something had shifted inside him, a real awakening of why he had devoted his life to this stage, to these songs, to these impossible moments of connection. Journalist Leslie Ann Jones remembered a show in Budapest where Freddie was determined to give his audience a special song in their native language. He couldn't quite get them, so he scrawled them in black marker pen on his left palm. During the performance, he made flamboyant gestures with his arm, which enabled him to read the lyrics written on his hand. It was so important to him to get it right. I melted. This was who Freddie was at his core, a man who cared so deeply about his fans that he would write lyrics on his palm just to make them feel honored. Sarah watched the rest of the concert from the wings, still wearing Freddie's wristband, still trembling with the magnitude of what had happened. Crew members offered her water, blankets, anything she needed. She declined everything except the chance to keep watching. When the final notes of "We Are the Champions" faded into the night, Freddie came backstage, exhausted but luminous. The transformation that had worried him before the show had worked its magic. But something else had happened too. He walked directly to Sarah. "You," he said, pointing at her with a tired smile, are either the bravest or the maddest person I've ever met. Sarah couldn't form words. She just stood there, clutching the wristband like it was the most precious object in the universe. Leslie Ann Jones also noted that Freddie was an incredibly shy man and that she had more than her share of downtime moments with him. In this moment, that shy man emerged completely. "What's your name, darling?" "Sarah," she managed to whisper. "Sarah." He repeated it like he was tasting the word. "I want you to know something, Sarah. What you did tonight, it wasn't reckless. It was faith. You believed in something so strongly that you were willing to risk everything for it." He paused, his dark eyes growing serious. "That's rare. That's beautiful. Don't ever let the world take that from you." And then Freddie Mercury did something that would change Sarah's life forever, something that the press wouldn't discover until years later. The story might have ended there, a beautiful moment, a touching encounter, a memory to treasure. But Freddie Mercury wasn't finished. Before Sarah left that night, Freddie asked his assistant to get her contact information. It seemed like a courtesy, the kind of gesture a star makes to be polite and then immediately forgets. But Freddie didn't forget. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a letter at her small apartment in Manchester. The envelope bore no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, artistic, alive. Inside was a note that read, "Darling Sarah, I've been thinking about that night. You told me backstage that you sing. You told me you've always dreamed of performing. I don't make promises I can't keep, but I do know people. If you're serious about your dream, this number will connect you to someone who can help. Use it. And remember what I told you. Those who dream too big are the only ones who change the world. F." Freddie had said very early in his life, and before his career had taken off, that he would not be just a rock star. He would be a legend. And part of being a legend, he understood, was lifting others toward their own greatness. Sarah stared at that letter for hours. She had never told anyone about her dreams of singing. It had seemed too foolish, too impossible for a factory worker from Manchester. But backstage that night, in the chaos and emotion of the moment, she confessed her secret ambition to a man she never expected to see again. And he had listened. She made the call. The number connected her to a producer in London who specialized in discovering new talent. Within a year, Sarah had recorded her first demo. Within 2 years, she was performing at small venues across England. She never became a superstar. She never filled stadiums or commanded the kind of worship that Freddie inspired. But she found her voice. She lived her dream. And every time she stepped on stage, she touched the wristband on her arm, the one she had never taken off since that night in Milton Keynes. Because Freddie Mercury had taught her the most important lesson of all, that dreams aren't given, they're claimed. The years passed. Sarah's small singing career continued, bringing her quiet joy rather than explosive fame. She married, had children, watched the world change around her, while holding on to the memories of that miraculous night. And then, in November 1991, the news came that shattered her heart. Queen lead singer Freddie Mercury died from AIDS-related complications on November 24th, 1991. Mercury had kept his AIDS diagnosis private until the week of his death. Sarah was at home when she heard. She collapsed onto her couch, unable to process the magnitude of the loss. The man who had changed her life, the man who had seen her, truly seen her, in a crowd of 100,000, was gone. She wore the wristband to his tribute concert the following year, standing anonymously in the crowd at Wembley Stadium while some of the greatest artists in the world paid homage to her hero. Queen's set began with a video montage of Mercury's call and response interactions with his audiences. Their performance featured the surviving Queen members playing with guest singers and guitarists, including legendary artists from across the musical spectrum. Sarah wept through the entire show, but her tears weren't just grief, they were gratitude. In the years that followed, she began sharing her story. At first, only with close friends, then with local newspapers. Eventually, with Queen fan communities around the world. One fan reportedly had a personal encounter and was surprised to later find that Freddie remembered. The fan recalls, "I met him at a bar in Charlotte, North Carolina, after the show. It was a brief 3-minute greeting. It was very nice and smelled so damn good. 3 days later in Philly, we saw them again. He came over to where I was standing and said, "Oh, we have some family here, hello." And he waved. Jamie, and I knew it was a hello to us. He remembered. Special moment, special time, special person. Freddie had a gift for making people feel seen, for remembering the faces in the crowd. And Sarah's story joined a tapestry of thousands, ordinary people whose lives have been touched by an extraordinary man. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. In 2023, Sarah Mitchell was 74 years old. Her singing days were long behind her, but she still wore the wristband every single day. It had faded, the leather cracked and worn, but she refused to take it off. That summer, she received an unexpected invitation. An exhibition titled Freddie Mercury, A World of His Own, was held at Sotheby's in New Bond Street, London. Nearly 140,000 fans visited the exhibition, which Sotheby's had called the life and work of Britain's greatest rock showman of the 20th century. The curators had heard Sarah's story and wanted to include her as part of the exhibit, not as a display, but as a living testament to Freddie's legacy. Sarah stood in that gallery, surrounded by Freddie's costumes, his handwritten lyrics, his piano, his personal possessions. And on a small display case in the corner, there was a photograph from Milton Keynes, the moment Freddie had reached out his hand to help a young woman onto the stage. Next, it was a card that read, "Freddie Mercury believed in the power of dreams." He believed that every fan who came to see him deserved to feel seen, valued, and loved. This photograph captures one of those moments, when a young woman named Sarah crossed a barrier and found herself face to face with her hero. What happened next changed her life forever. Sarah touched the glass, her weathered fingers tracing the outline of her younger self. And then she whispered the words that Freddie had spoken to her that night. The words that had given her the courage to change her life. The words she had carried with her for 4 decades. "Don't let anyone tell you that you dream too big, darling. The ones who dream too big are the only ones who change the world." The crowd around her fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. And somewhere, Sarah believed, Freddie Mercury was still performing, still connected with his audience across the barrier between this world and the next. Because legends never die. They just keep singing. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who loves Freddie Mercury. If the story inspired you, remember, even legends face battles unknown to the world. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves Freddie Mercury. This story was inspired by documented accounts of Freddie Mercury's extraordinary connection with fans, his philosophy on performance, and the countless testimonies of those whose lives he touched. While the specific narrative has been dramatized, it is grounded in the authentic spirit of who Freddie Mercury truly was, a performer who believed every single person in the audience deserved to feel seen. There exists a moment in every human being's life when the distance between who we are and who we dream to be seems insurmountable, a chasm so deep it paralyzes us, making us believe our dreams are too grand for ordinary people like us. Sarah Mitchell knew this chasm intimately. She saw it every morning when she woke up for another shift at the textile factory in Manchester. She felt it every night when she lay down exhausted, wondering if her life would only be this, an endless sequence of gray days without any color. And then came that night in Milton Keynes. What happened on that stage transcends any definition of show, performance, or entertainment. It was something rarer, more precious, more profoundly human. It was the moment when a star chose to descend from the sky to touch the hand of someone who had forgotten she deserved to be touched. Think about what Freddie Mercury could have done. He could have ignored the invasion. He could have let security drag Sarah away while he continued his flawless show. He could have made a joke at her expense, transforming the moment into entertainment for the masses. The audience would have applauded anyway. The machine of spectacle would have kept spinning. No one would have blamed him. But Freddie wasn't just an artist. Freddie was a healer of souls. When he raised his hand and made security stop, something shifted in the universe. 100,000 people held their breath because they instinctively understood they were witnessing something sacred. It wasn't about music. It wasn't about fame. It was about a man looking into the eyes of a terrified woman and saying, without words, "I see you, You matter. Your dream is not madness. There is a specific loneliness in being a fan. You love someone who doesn't know you exist. You dedicate hours, days, years of your life to someone who will never pronounce your name. You save every penny to buy tickets, records, posters. Fragment of connection that exists only in your imagination. And deep down, a cruel voice whispers that you are pathetic, that this love is one-sided, that you are wasting your devotion on someone who will never reciprocate. Freddie Mercury destroyed that lie in a single gesture. When he knelt at the edge of the stage and extended his hand to Sarah, he was telling every fan in the world, you are not invisible. You are not sales numbers or audience statistics. You are human beings with hearts that beat faster when the music begins. And this love you feel, it is reciprocated. It is honored. It is the reason all of this exists. What makes this story truly devastating is not just the moment itself. It's the context. Freddie Mercury was a man who carried heavy secrets. Behind that triumphant smile and that magnetic presence, there was a human being dealing with fears that few knew about. He transformed his pain into art, his loneliness into connection, his fear into courage. And that night, he chose to share that transformation with a complete stranger. Don't let anyone tell you that you dream too big, darling. Those who dream too big are the only ones who change the world. Those words were not just advice. They were a confession. Freddie Mercury knew what it was like to be underestimated, ridiculed, considered impossible. He knew what it was like to look in the mirror and see someone the world said wasn't enough. And he had proven the world wrong with every note he sang, with every stage he conquered, with every heart he touched. When he gave his bracelet to Sarah, he wasn't just giving an accessory. He was transferring a part of his own journey. He was saying, this here is proof that the impossible can happen. Wear it as armor. Wear it as a reminder. Wear it as a promise that you too can cross your own chasm. And she crossed it. Sarah never became a superstar. She never filled stadiums or won awards. But she sang. She climbed onto stages. She lived her dream on a scale the world considers small, but that for her was infinite. And every time fear tried to silence her, she touched that worn bracelet and remembered that once, on a magical night, the greatest artist in the world had looked into her eyes and believed in her. Freddie Mercury died in 1991, but legends don't really die. They transform into stories we pass on, into lessons we teach our children, into moments of courage that inspire us to cross our own barriers. Today, when you feel too small, too invisible, too ordinary for your own dreams, remember Sarah Mitchell running toward that stage. Remember Freddie Mercury extending his hand. Remember that the distance between who you are and who you dream to be is not a chasm. It is merely a barrier waiting for you to have the courage to cross it. Because in the end, we are all Sarah. We are all in the crowd, looking at something that seems impossible to reach. The only difference between those who achieve their dreams and those who only dream is the willingness to run, even trembling, even afraid, even without any guarantee that someone will extend their hand on the other side. Freddie Mercury taught us that it's worth running, and that is the greatest legacy a legend can leave behind. For Freddie, for Sarah, for everyone who ever dreamed too big.